Hey guys, insight number 3. Now we're in 2nd Nephi chapter 4. Good stuff. And this is last words of Lehi, and then from 14 through to the end is Nephi's psalm, which is often it's just called Nephi's psalm, but it's Nephi having his psalm moment, really, his crying out to the Lord, his praising of the Lord, and then his asking for things, which is just a really fancy word of saying prayer. It's the fancy old school way of saying prayer, but it's not just a little prayer. It's a Xenos prayer. It's a I cried out. I was broken. This is now the younger plea. This is like a gut wrenching. My father passed away. I am now loaded with everything, and I'm like struggling plea. So it's wonderful words. But let's look at the first part just to begin with. 5 through 7 is Lehi's last words, really, that we have here. I'm sure he said other things like, kind of a drink of water and, where's Nephi? And, didn't like literally die at the end of verse 7. But these were the last recorded words we have of his. He said here, but behold, my sons and my daughters, I cannot go down to my grave. Should I save, I should leave a blessing upon you. For behold, I know that ye are brought up in the way. If ye are brought up in the way, ye should go, ye shall not depart from it. Now, even in the verse before that, it's something that he says often about, you're going to prosper if you keep the commandments. If you don't, it's not going to go well for you. Basically, granddad advice, dad advice, prophet advice, if you keep the commandments, as much as you keep the commandments and as much as you do that, everything's going to go better. Doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect. There's going to be no trials or anything like that, but you will be able to accomplish all those things. You'll be able to get through those times. You will find peace. Even in the midst of like the ugliest things, you will find peace and strength, which is spiritual survival in the last days, which is what President Nelson talks about still. So this is something that is not a new message, and yet we still fail at it. We could still do better, every single one of us. So good words from Lehi. Anyway, he says in 6 and 7 that, wherefore if ye are cursed, behold, I leave my blessing upon you, that the cursing may be taken from you and be answered upon the heads of your parents. Wherefore, because of my blessing, the Lord God will not suffer that ye shall perish. Wherefore, he will be merciful unto you and unto your seed forever. Now, cursed here is hardship from others. So, wherefore, if ye are experiencing hardship from others, don't worry. I'll leave my blessing on you that this hardship from others will be taken from you and you'll be okay. You're not going to be punished for other people's mistakes, other people's actions. You're only responsible for you. You might have to live through other people's mistakes and actions, but you're only going to be responsible for what you decide, the way you behave, the way you reach out to your brother. People say, oh, you're not your brother's keeper. I was like, yes, but you can't make decisions for other people and make them do it. That's a dictator. And that is not Christ-like living. That's why we don't challenge people to do things. We invite, we love, we share and invite. We might give an admonition. That's a strong invitation. But there's no 30-day Book of Mormon challenge. It's not a gym workout. It's a spiritual experience. So, yeah. Lehi's last word of counsel. Doesn't matter. Somebody else has done something. You're going to be all right. Which I love, because he's talking specifically, I would say here, Laman and Lemuel. And that when Nephi starts saying brethren, we probably assume it's Laman and Lemuel, but there's, at this point, more than that. Otherwise, he'd still be calling them Laman and Lemuel. So more than the two. And as you see, when they break up after Lehi passes away in the next chapter, that quite a few stay with Laman and Lemuel for whatever reason. So it's more than just two of them at this point. And that no matter what they're going to do, children and grandchildren of these people, grandchildren of mine, great-grandchildren, and the following generations, you do not need to live in that way. And we see that later on when the Lamanites become the righteous and the Nephites are wicked. So there's that pride cycle that continues to happen, and we'll talk about that a lot in Book of Mormon here. I'm trying to reword it because that can get a little deaf to your ears if you hear it too much. But it's that same thing. So, some really good counsel here. So, first of all, verse 5, leave a blessing wherever you go. Not literally an actual, priesthood blessing, but, leave goodness. Pray for the people that are there. If you're staying in a house and you'd normally pray for your own home to be safe, pray for theirs. Leave a blessing. Leave a goodness where you go. Verse 6, you're going to experience hardship, which is curses in this one, from or because of others. However, the Lord will bless you. Don't worry about it. Like, it's ugly and it's hard, yes. And it's not how you wanted it, of course. However, you can choose. It's still your choice. And you're not going to be cursed for somebody else's bad mistake. It's not going to lie on you. It's not going to be a debt on you. The world might make it that, but God does not make it that. And verse 7, you will have the Lord's merciful goodness. Always. Merciful goodness will be yours. So if you do have to be lumbered with someone else's debt, because the world is making you do that, the Lord will make it possible for you to get through those moments. Great. So, Nephi Psalm. Now, I'm not going to go through everything in here, and I totally invite you to read this. It's 14 through 35. He talks about briefly in 12 and 13 that Lehi passes away, they bury him, and then after his death, Laman and Lemuel, and it says, and the sons of Ishmael were angry with me, because he kept admonishing them. He was strongly encouraging them, you need to do these things, and they were just not in that space. And that happens even today at church. We go to our youth, you really need to come, we would love you to come and do this, and they're all just like, I don't want to. You know, so it doesn't make them like terrible people, but it does create dissension, contention, and it's not blessing them. And Nephi probably pleaded so hard, like any prophet or caring relative would, because I want you back with, I love you, you know, you're my family, come back. I was in the youth the other night with the temple, and the temple with the youth, I was like, so cold and flu meds, seriously. And it was wonderful to be in there with them, and I love going down and being in the temple with the people, and I wouldn't want any of them, like some were missing, and I know where they weren't there, and it wasn't because they weren't worthy, and I'm like, oh, that's such a blessing right there. Some were travelling, some couldn't make that time slot, and the rest of them turned up, even some that only go to seminary and don't actually turn up to church that much, which I was just like, this is incredible. And for whatever reason they don't go to church, because I've done that too, doesn't mean that I haven't lost my testimony, and I saw hope in these youth. They've still got it. They're just learning how to live it, and I love that about them. So I just wanted to like wrap arms around them and hold them close, but I can imagine that's what Nephi was feeling here, and just like, I'm trying to do everything I can, and unfortunately it just happened to be something that grated on them, and it just, So he then gives them this psalm. He goes to the Lord with this and pours out his heart. He writes the things of his soul, verse 15. He brings all his emotions to God. He talks about in 16, which I've highlighted like a million times, behold, my soul delighteth in the things of the Lord, and my heart pondereth continually upon the things which I have seen and heard. And I do that. I could say that is me too. My soul delights in the things of the Lord. I don't know how to live them all. I'm struggling with that. And he goes on to say this later on. I would word this a little different for me, but this is him talking. But I still delight in the things of the Lord. I don't know if all of them are for me. I'm learning that they are, and I'm learning how to do them better. But I'd still delight in them. And he says that my heart pondereth continually upon the things which I have seen and heard. Because I've seen and heard some things that are totally not of this world, and they're incredible. The experiences I felt, the words I've had to say that I'm like, where did that come from? And it's exactly what's needed. There's no way to explain it other than it's from God, it's from Christ, and I love that, so I'm constantly on that. And he goes on there, he says the greatness of the Lord, he talks about all the things he went through, and then he says, but you know what? He starts turning it around, and he says everything, like he was carried away by the Spirit, even on 26, or 28 actually, as he says, awake my soul, no longer droop in sin, like not that he was sinful, but just no longer droop in misery, no longer droop in this desolate place, no thank you. And he talks about the good things, and then he says, like all the good things that the Lord's done, and then in 35, he asks for something, and that no matter what I asked for. So this was a good way, this is like how to do that, and what should these verses resonate with you? What sticks out in here? What do you delight in these verses? To know that not only he had similar things to us, but he was experiencing this too. So drop a comment. All right, see you in chapter 5.